Thank you, Madam President. And I rise in support of the legislation before us this evening, and certainly want to thank Senator Flexer first for her kind words, much appreciated, but for her hard work on these issues year after year after year to help people be able to exercise their constitutional rights in our state and do it in a way that is free and fair and that empowers people to come out and vote. So, Senator Flexer, thank you for your work on this bill that is so important, on the other GAE bills that you have put forward this year and in previous years. I'm so proud of the work that we've done in this chamber to help expand voting rights that has ultimately led to that in Connecticut. We're not perfect yet. We still got a long ways to go. We've got some bills coming up in the future that will actually help make our democracy stronger. And maybe we can get the sound system to work better too. But Madam President, the reality of this bill is that our democracy is only as strong as our ability to vote. And it is imperative that people in this state who are qualified to vote have the ability to vote. Madam President, I am so concerned by what I see across this country to take away people's right to vote. And it should concern every single person in this state, because what it does is it erodes our democracy bit by bit. And we have watched this erosion of our democracy since the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, struck down parts of the Voting Rights Act back in 2013. We have seen it from state after state after state erode people's right to vote, which weakens our democracy year after year. People get frustrated. They don't vote. They can't vote. We put barriers in front of them to vote. And to me, Madam President, that is wrong. And I would agree, I would assume all my colleagues around the circle would agree that is wrong. But Madam President, let's look at it this way. We are here in this circle because of 100,000 of our constituents and their ability to vote to let us come here and do this amazing job that we do. And then while we're here, we still exercise democracy around this circle by voting based on what we think is the right or the wrong thing to do. We vote green or we vote red, whatever we agree or disagree with. But could you imagine, Madam President, for a second, if we put the same kind of barriers that are in place in other places here in this circle? For example, if we said, I could vote here on my desk on a bill that I liked, and yet maybe somebody else in the 36th district or the 2nd district couldn't vote here in the circle. They had to go vote down the road for a bill, or somebody could vote only on a certain day. That would be ridiculous. But that's what's happening across this country when people can't use drop boxes like they did a few years ago, because that might encourage people to actually vote. Or they can't vote on Sundays or the weekends because that would actually encourage them to vote. Or they have to have some sort of a specialized ID because that might encourage them to vote. Or the districts are getting gerrymandered so much that it frustrates people and they don't vote. So, Madam President, this is why these kinds of bills are so important. This is why John Lewis fought to make sure that people around this country could vote. And they would have that right to vote because he understood that everybody should have that right, no matter what you look like or who you are or where you're from or what your station in life is. If you're 18 and older, you're a citizen of this country, you should have that ability to vote. And I would certainly hope that my colleagues would listen to the folks around this circle who've had those experiences where they could not exercise those rights. And they have those experiences of not having the same abilities that I've had, or their families have, grandparents, parents, same way. Listen to those stories, that we learn from each other around this circle when we hear other people's stories and other people's experiences and try to then craft legislation that is better to make our state stronger. And that's exactly what, when we expand voting rights, that's exactly what we're doing, is we're making this state a stronger state. Madam President, we have other bills to do this year. One includes codifying what was passed last year with early voting. And that's going to be an important part of our law of the land going forward. But it took way too long for that to happen. We're going to pass the bill, I hope, this session that finally starts the process of no excuse absentee balloting, which has been way too long. And if it doesn't pass by the required number, we're going to have to come back in a different legislature to hopefully vote on that again, to then put it on the ballot, to then have to codify it. It's going to take a long time for that to happen. This is one of the reasons why Connecticut is, as much as we have worked so hard to expand voting rights in this country, is one of the reasons why people still say we have some of the most restrictive voting rights in this nation. It is time to turn that around. We need to empower people to vote, to strengthen our democracy. And that doesn't mean that it helps Democrats or Republicans. In fact, if you look at the early voting studies, it doesn't help either party. It doesn't help a Democrat, it doesn't help a Republican, but it does help the voter. It empowers the voter to exercise their rights. And we should make sure that any time a voter is out there wanting to cast their ballot, that there aren't restrictions in place. And if there are, state law is going to make sure that that is handled quickly and efficiently so that everybody has that right. It pains me to see what I'm seeing in other states around this country and what they're doing to disenfranchise voters, especially black and brown voters, low-income voters, voters whose first language is not English. That, to me, is everything against how this country was founded and the principles that we stand for. And so anytime that we have this opportunity, Madam President, to encourage voting, to strengthen our voting laws, to help ensure that people have that right to vote, that they will vote. I'm sure all of us have these same stories when we're at the voting booths on Election Day. We're shaking hands, we're talking to people, and inevitably we see a senior citizen who comes up and wants to cast their ballot. How many times have we been at a polling site when somebody comes up who may be 80 or 90 years old, sometimes almost 100 or 100 years old, and they will say they've never missed an opportunity to vote in their lives. Some of whom I've met have been survivors of the Holocaust. Some of whom may have walked on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Some of whom may not have had that right to vote when they first turned 18. But damn it, they're going to make sure they vote on Election Day going forward. They're never going to miss that right to vote. That's who we're fighting for. Those are some of the people we do this bill out of respect for and in their spirit. And not only for them, but for their families, their children, and their grandchildren as well. People have fought and died for the right to vote in this country, and we should be doing everything we can to make sure that the blood that was left on those battlefields so that we have this right to vote, that we're ensuring that people across this country have that right as well. And we start here by doing it, and we make sure that people in the state of Connecticut have that right to vote, and they are free to exercise that right, cast their ballots, and vote for the person they think is best qualified for their office. Thank you, Madam President.